fourth of six Appetite for Angus get-togethers. This morning's session is on choosing the right route to market, and we are delighted to be joined by Steph Johnston from the Crest Company, and we've also got Kerry Ritchie from SEC Consulting. And for those of you joining us for the first time, hello, welcome. These sessions are totally relaxed. There will be some presentation from Kerry and Steph, and then it's really just your opportunity to ask questions and find out everything you want to know about route to market. And without any further ado, I will hand over to our first speaker, which is Kerry. Over to you.
Thanks, Callum. Hi, everybody. Just a bit about myself. I work at SAC Consulting. I head up the food and drink team. I've been in the food industry since 1984. Please don't do the sums. Started off actually in the product development, then buying with the CWS, which is the supplier to all the co-ops in Manchester. And then what can I say? I met a Scotsman and moved north. And unfortunately, at that time, there were no buying places in Scotland. So I shifted to the other side of the desk and have been working with suppliers ever since, actually. So this is my 30th year in Scotland, and that's been my role since I've been there. So if we can have the next slide, please, Callum. So this is the agenda for us today. I'm going to do a very brief. I'm trying not to go into too much depth. Look at the different routes to market, and then we're going to look at just some of the basic sort of things, some of which are common sense, but some of which don't always get done. I'm then going to hand over to Steph at the Crestco, who's going to take us through their story and some of the things they come across, and then we're going to touch at the end on sustainable product pricing. There'll likely be a little bit of crossover in terms of messaging, because actually the messaging should cross over, because actually if it doesn't, we're not telling you the right things. So, and I've just put there as a reminder the link to the Appetite for Angus website, where we hope we can get the bandwidth, I think it is, Sophie, to get these, or the recordings of the presentations only uploaded onto the site. Certainly copies of the presentation in PDF form are available on the website. Okay, for those that can't attend the meeting. So let's move on to our first slide. Now listen, guys, I apologize. This is a very complicated slide. It is by no means complete. I've tried to focus there on some of the key routes to market. And this slide really outlines the sort of key options. Many of you, as you've already said, if you look at this slide, you're the guys at the bottom, the producers, the farmers, the processors, the food processors, the drink processors. And many of you do go straight up the middle there, direct to consumers. And obviously, there's lots of options of how to get to the consumer. And what I've tried to do here is just outline some of them. So if we look at the right-hand side, try to work out if it's your right, but it is the right-hand side of that diagram. And we're looking to the sort of retail side. Then obviously there's you can go through central distribution to a multiple retailer and then get to the consumer that way. You can go to wholesale distribution, go through symbols and independent retailers and get to the retailer and the consumer that way. Just realised I haven't got arrows. There should be arrows from the retail and food service to consumer, so apologies for that. Obviously, some of you will deliver direct into retailer for some of the independent retailers. Steph will actually add a lot more detail here in terms of the Crestco, and I want to use that as an example because we can't do all of these options in depth today, but what we can do is be aware of what the options are. And obviously, yeah, so I was just saying there, the arrow going up the side, some of you will actually go direct to retail yourselves by either distributing yourself or using a distributor. So to get through the retail stage, there's lots of different ways to do it. And we'll come on to some of the sort of basics, do's and don'ts afterwards. Some of you will also potentially use online platforms like Amazon and others, the sort of e-commerce platform. So again, bypass the traditional routes and go straight to another platform that sells your product if you're not doing it direct. Obviously, retail is one side of the potential market, but there's obviously also the food service market, which is obviously very difficult at the moment. I completely appreciate that. But there are a number, as we know, just within Angus, but a number nationwide of food service businesses that have actually pivoted their business and are doing takeaways and just trying to capitalize. There's a number we see online advertising their Valentine's platters or their Valentine's afternoon teas, and there's a great collaboration that came upon my feed last night that's happening in Angus. So if Fiona's around, I'm sure she'll tell us around about that later. So food service, whilst it's very difficult at the moment, obviously going forward there'll be opportunities, but there are still some opportunities in terms of how those businesses have pivoted. And again, the routes to those can be via wholesale, or some of them will have their own central distribution. And the best thing to do is obviously to know about these, and then we make the links and we connect with who they are, and we'll have a demonstration of that with Steph today. So it looks terribly complicated. You have to choose the route that's right for you. And when we talk with some of the slides later on, we're looking at the basics and some of the sustainable pricing. And when you work out which route you want to go, you need to make sure you can do that profitably and make sure that you've taken into account all the costs. I think Stephanie, that's one of the points Stephanie might highlight later. In terms also of this diagram, as producers and processors, you're pushing that demand, you're trying to push the growth. And from the other end, they're trying to pull the growth. And what I wanted to do by saying that is really to highlight when you're working with people in the supply chain, like wholesalers, like distributors, be they specialists, be they general, it's about that collaborative piece of working together. You know, as a buyer, I had things I had to achieve for my range, for my growth, for my target, for my profit. And actually, suppliers, I would work with suppliers would work with me to actually help me achieve that. That demands that you know what that food service person, what that retail person, what that wholesaler, what that distributor is actually trying to achieve themselves. So for those of you who've heard me before, that you have to distinguish between customer and consumer. And the wholesaler, the distributor, the food service operator, the retailer, the specialist distributors here, they are all your customers. And they will help you consummate that sale with the consumer. And I think it's that partnership, that collaborative piece that's really important here. Lots of benefits of working with these guys in terms of field sales, telesales, point of sale, marketing and promotion, stock management, debt control, all the things, many of the things actually can be a real pain for smaller businesses. These guys are expert at it, and they can help you do that. Obviously at a cost, but you know, as managers of your business, you will balance out whether that's a cost that's a value and can help you grow your market. And this very much has to be going into anything like this with your eyes open and aware of what the demands on you and your business will be, but also the opportunities. And there's a huge opportunity here for growth through these different routes to market. I'm just going to look at the next slide, which really just outlines some real basics. And we can dig a bit deeper in any of these in the questions. I just don't want death by PowerPoint. So some of the basics here, very common sense, but not always happening. When you're going to pitch to somebody, talk to somebody, you need to be aware of what market, your wider market, what that person is selling, what that retailer stocks, what the food service menu is, who the food service suppliers outlets, what they might well be, what is the wholesaler, the distributor, what's their business about, what sort of range of products they carry, and then okay, and how is your product going to help them achieve what they're looking to do? So that market knowledge piece and that category expertise piece. So if it's gin, it's a huge awareness of not only what's going on in the gin market, but also what's happening in the rest of the alcohol market, in the non-alcoholic market. Because as a consumer, I might choose to buy alcohol, I might choose to buy a non-alcoholic beverage. So actually, you need to understand that whole category. And the same is for every category. So you need to understand that, have that category expertise, and have a clear and articulated relevant product. So every one of us loves our product. Absolutely. Why wouldn't we? But we've got to do more than love our product. We've got to make sure that actually it's relevant to the category that we're trying to get into, to the distribution route that we're trying to get into. It's got to be relevant to the customer and the consumer. Otherwise, no one's going to stock it, no one's going to buy it. So it's got to be good, but When you're choosing a route to market, think of those things. You've got to demonstrate your product knowledge, and I'm not going to go too deep into this. I'm sure Steph will talk about this, and be able to describe your consumer. We once at the Co-op, many, many moons ago, way back in the 80s, we did an exercise and asked researchers to draw what they thought the Co-op board looked like. Well, I'll leave that to your imaginations. But actually, for me, that was quite a good lesson, because it made me think, you've always got to be able to describe your target consumer, because if you can't describe them, how is the wholesaler, the distributor, the retailer, the food service operator going to be able to see whether that fits their customer profile, which is obviously the consumer? Pricing, we're going to talk a bit more about later, but it has to be transparent and it has to be sensible. And that sensible piece comes from looking at the market, knowing what other people are charging. But on the other side of the coin, you have to cover your costs, and you need to know what your costs are. When we talk about working with these people in the routes to market, it's about having a sort of clear plan for your product, being able to say, well, this is where in your range, in your offering, I see my product sitting because X, Y, Z. And then you start, I would hope, to develop a growth plan, but a collaborative growth plan with the distributor and with the wholesaler, so that together you're working on your business. That obviously requires good communication skills. There will be a level of accreditation required. Now, this is not my area of expertise, but I think Steph might be mentioning a little bit about that, and there's certainly lots of help out there. But there will be a level of accreditation required. And I think lastly, but certainly not leastly, and perhaps probably the most important thing, is about creating relationships, good business relationships. Business is about people. We are not robots. We need to get on with people. The better you get on with somebody, the more they're going to like working with you. So it's about creating and managing good business-to-business relationships, and not just at one level, but at many levels. It might be the telesales level, the accountancy level, the account manager level, many levels, and be prepared to invest some time in that. I hope I'm not telling you things you already know, but I think sometimes it's just a good to remind ourselves, actually, because we're all so busy. We sometimes lose sight of the basic things, and it's good to sort of revisit them and think, could I do something a little bit better there? Anyway, I'm going to pass on now to Steph. I hope that was okay, Steph, and over to you to talk to us about the Cresco. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I work for the Crest Company, and we're a fine foods distributor of ambient and chilled speciality food and drinks. And we deliver throughout the UK using our own fleet of dual temperature vehicles. And primarily we are servicing farm shops, delis, butchers, independent retailers and garden centres. Our head office is in Dunfermline, which is where we operate from, but we do have a depot in Wetherby, also in Leighton Buzzard, and a newly opening one in Telford. We're keen to support both independent manufacturers as well as independent retailers. We are a member of Pharma and the Guild of Fine Foods. And we were recently voted the top distributor for the 4th consecutive year, and this is voted for by the members of the Guild of Fine Foods. So in terms of our products, we sell primarily via brochures and a website. So we produce 2 ambient brochures throughout the year, one in February, which covers the spring-summer period, and then another one in August, which will cover the autumn-winter period. We also produce 2 chiller and cheese catalogues throughout the year, again, one for spring-summer, and this is around about March, and another one in October for the autumn-winter period. We also produce seasonal brochures covering Christmas, Easter and Halloween. And as I mentioned, as well as the brochures, we also sell online via our website. So in terms of any opportunities to work with Crest as a supplier, when we're selecting new ranges or if we're looking for new suppliers, there's a lot of factors that we'll be considering when we're doing so. So for example, first of all, when looking at the product, we'll be thinking about what category it sits within. And then within that category, what other brands is it going to be competing with? We'll be looking at the packaging, whether the packaging is going to be appealing to the consumer, and does it fit with our customer base that we're buying for? We'll also be looking at the RRP, whether we think that's relative to the product that's being sold, and also compare that to similar products that we already list perhaps. We're also needing to consider the format that the product comes in, whether it's retail ready to go straight onto the retailer's shelf, And also, is it warehouse ready? Is it going to be suitably boxed and labelled for storage and onward transportation? Another key factor, which is hugely important if it's within the chilled ranges, would be the shelf life available on the product when it comes into our depots, so that we know how much shelf life we can offer to our customers. Pricing, this is key, particularly in the early stages of product development. Really important to ensure that any distributor margin is built into the pricing model, so that if you do reach the stage of being able to upscale and work with a distributor, then this pricing is already in place. And we have come across a number of suppliers that do fail to address this during the early stages of their product setup. And it's perhaps because they're not looking that far ahead as working with a distributor. Initially, they're just looking at perhaps getting the product out there into the retailer and perhaps missing that part out. But it then makes it really difficult further down the line, and it can be a real challenge for us to be able to work with them, because there's perhaps just not enough shared margin there when you break it down. And if they've already got a pricing structure in place with a customer base, the last thing they want to do is then put through a big price increase in order to accommodate that margin. We would also be looking at the current route to market that supplier is using for their brands. You know, are they doing everything direct themselves at the moment, or are they working with a distributor and direct, and they're looking to perhaps expand, or is this the first opportunity to work with a distributor? We would then be looking at the production capacity as well for the manufacturer, whether they're able to actually produce enough stock within a reasonable lead time to be able to meet the potential demands that might come with working with a distributor, particularly if they have been used to just supplying direct and there perhaps hasn't been as huge a demand as they might come with a distributor. Also, something that's really important is that the brand activity is a huge element that we'll be considering. You know, what's going on behind the scenes to sell the brand, what's the marketing strategy behind the business, and would this producer be able to support us with any trade events, with any samples, or perhaps customer associated events such as tastings within stores? If you're listed within the brochure, are you able to support with advertising, promotional activity? And we have a number of brands in the catalogue, so it's really important that the brand isn't listed with a distributor and expected to sort of sell on its own. It's really important that there's a marketing strategy going on behind there to support that and drive that forwards. So hopefully that would provide you with a bit of an overview of how we operate as a distributor, and in terms of if we're looking to list any new products, the essential factors that we would need to consider before we can do that.
Thank you, Steph. That was really insightful, actually, and some really important things to I'm just writing down a question for you later. Some really important things for people to take on board, especially in terms of the pricing piece and the marketing piece and the ability to support. I'm just recording a question there so I don't forget it. So thank you, Steph. We'll have some questions. Please do think about the questions you have for Steph. It's really valuable to have Steph here today. It's such an opportunity to be able to talk directly with the Cresco and to understand and to see, you know, to get the advice and the expertise and experience they have and really learn from it. So if we just move on to, I've got a couple of slides just before the Q&A session, and it is about pricing, and it's about sustainable pricing. And I've tried to keep this, I can waffle on a lot, so I've tried to keep this really succinct. But I think there's 3 simple rules to pricing. Your product's got to be competitive on the retail market, its retail price, and then to the food service, to the retail, and to the distributor. So it's got to be profitable for everyone in the supply chain. So it's no good you being able to just make a margin. And if you can make a margin now going direct to consumer, when you're sorting out that price now, think in terms of, okay, if I, at 5 years down the line, like Steph said, if I want to involve a distributor, I need to build in that in my margin now, okay? Because you can't suddenly hike the consumer price just because you've changed your route to market. So that profit for everybody in the supply chain is really important, because without profit, the business will go under. Your business, the distributor, whatever. So actually, the profit for everyone is really important. If we look at the next slide, I just wanted to really think a little bit more about understanding pricing. And I'll mention here, there is a webinar that is on the Appetite for Angus website. I think that Callum and I recorded in January 2019, called Pricing for Profits. That's free to all of you. Go and have a look at that. There's more detail there if you want to know more. But I think some key things here. You need to know your market, and by understanding and knowing your market, understanding the competitive set that you're in. So if you're producing a pie, you're not just competing against other pies. It could be pizzas, it could be quiches, it could be anything somebody else would buy instead of a pie. So think broadly in terms of your competitive set, and understand the prices that they're selling at. And that will give you an idea of where you're going to position your product in the market. So an idea of the attainable retail price. Through understanding more about the retailers in this, let's use a retailer example, understanding more about the retailers, talk to them. You know, if it's farm shops you want to get into, talk to them, understand the margins they need to make when they are putting your products. So suddenly you've got your retail price, then you know what you have to sell to the farm shop. Let's use that as an example, and their price. So you get an understanding of their margin. And you do this by communicating, researching your market, spending time getting to know your potential customers. And you can obviously pick up a lot of other information as part from just pricing information when you're talking to these people to really understand what they are trying to achieve with their shop. So I think we've got Smithy's Deli on here. So that would be a great example to understand, you know, what they're trying to achieve as a deli, what margin they need to make. And that gives you an idea of what the product, the price your product needs to get to them at. If you're using wholesale, you've got to understand their margin. You've got to understand how they operate. And wholesale or distribution, I think it's really important to think about the value that they bring to it as well in terms of the reach and the sales piece, the marketing piece, the debt management piece, the whole management through the chain. There's a lot of opportunity at a price, but that's something, if you know the detail of your pricing structure, you'll be able to work out the value to yourself for doing. Steph said this, so I won't repeat it too much, but it's building in that potential for promotion. That could be providing samples, it could be paying for an advert in a brochure, it could be doing some sort of price promotion, it could be providing more product than just sampling in store for promotion. And that's really important to have the flexibility in your pricing strategy to cope with that. And I think also you need to understand your own costs. And I think the danger with a lot of small businesses is you start on this as there's a lot of emotion, good emotion involved in it, and that's really important. But you need to clearly understand your costs in producing your product. You know, if you're producing this in a factory, you'd be paying somebody a salary, a wage to produce that pie. So think about your costs, all your costs. And I think the point here is you're not just going my cost and adding a bit and adding a bit. It's not just about cost plus. It's about looking at the market and seeing what all the costs involved and what other people are selling at. So as I said, please do, if you haven't already, have a look at the webinar online. It goes into pricing with examples and a sort of an example work through of what I've just said. Do have a look at that. I don't want it to really go into any more depth just now, but happy obviously to take questions. And that's the end of our slides for today. We do have a slide we'll put up at the end with with the contact details. You might as well do it now, Callum, sorry. And that's well, as I said, this will be circulated, but that's all our contact details, and Steph has kindly allowed us to give you her contact details as well.